بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبع هداه أما بعد. We return to our discussion of al-idgham al-saghir, that is the coming together and the merging of two letters, the first of them having sukoon and the second of them having a haraka upon it. And we discussed in the previous session the fact that idgham al-saghir is of types. We have the idgham al-saghir that is referred to as al-mutamathilan, which is when two letters come together and those two letters are exactly the same. The second category that we looked at was idgham al-saghir, that is referred to as al-mutajanisan, that is when two letters come together and they are from the same makhraj, that is from the same place of origin, but the sifat are different, they're different letters having different characteristics, but the makhraj is one and the same. In today's session, then, we look at another area of idgham, or another category of idgham, and hopefully we'll look at the final two categories and observe the speech of Al-Imam Al-Jazariyah rahimahullah ta'ala. We look at the last two categories. The first of them is al-idgham al-mutaqariban, or idgham al-mutaqariban, the idgham of two letters that are close in origin. That is, the makhraj of each of these letters is next to the other. So because of the closeness and the nearness of the makhraj, then we have this affair, again reiterating the fact that idgham, the intent behind it, was the establishment of ease with qira'at, ease with recitation. And so the mouth is not overburdened with the letters, because of the fact that the Arabic language, from the letters are those letters that begin at the beginning of the mouth or with the lips, some of them in the middle of the mouth, some of them towards the back of the mouth. All of these areas are areas that inevitably are, if we have different places or different extremes of both of those regions having letters, then we're going to have some difficulty. But when letters are in close proximity, but there may be something from very small, minute difference between the placing of the tongue, for example, for this letter, and where the tongue should be placed for the other. They're very close. So because of this nearness, we have the establishment of this ease in the Arabic language for the one who recites it. In particular, Ikhwan, Allah Azza wa Jal, when He revealed the Quran to His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Quran was intended to be easy to understand, easy to remember, easy to recite. And a part of its eloquence is the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal revealed it using words that have this beautiful, when they're brought together, and when these words are used with these words and are coupled and paired with these words, then this is the most beautiful, the most beautifully constructed sentences that you will possibly find in the Arabic language, from on varying levels, the sound, the effect of those words, and even to the very construction of the letters that are present within those words, and the effect that they have when one recites them and when one hears them. Allah Azza wa Jal, this is from the miracle part, from a part of the miracle of the Quran, but something that we as English speakers oftentimes are not able to perceive because of the fact that the Arabic language, for many of us, we're unacquainted with the Arabic language, and if we are acquainted with it, then we're possibly able to read the letters and perhaps understand one or two words, but not much further than that. But when we actually look into the reality of the science of adab, which is to look at Arabic literature and the literature that was compiled during the era of whether the beginning of Islam, prior to Islam, the pre-Islamic era, or after the death of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the development of the sciences of the language and what have you, and the varying great poets that were present among the Ummah al-Islamiyah, or those whose language was rich, and the various diwanat and so on, then we see that the language itself, the beauty of the language, is present within the manner in which these letters come together, the manner in which these words come together, and there is nothing that comes near, even though the Arabic poetry is very beautiful, much of it, but there is nothing that comes near the Quran in relation to the beauty of the manner in which Allah Azza wa Jal revealed it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, with that being the case, one from its beauty is the construction or the coming together of letters, that we have some ease in the manner in which they are to be recited, and a part of that ease similarly beautifies the sound of some words, or beautifies the sound of a construction of words. Now, so in today's session then we look at idgham al-mutaqariban, and that, as we mentioned, is the idgham, or the coming together of letters that are close in makhraj, close in place of origin, but the sifat of the letters are different. So with mutamathilan, the first category that we looked at, the letters are exactly the same. With mutajanisan, the makhraj is exactly the same, but the letters are different. With mutaqariban, the makhraj is close to the makhraj of the other, but it is not the same makhraj. And so we need to be clear with that. With the first category, it is the same letter, and so we don't even need to look at makhraj. With the second category, the makhraj is the same, the place of origin of the letter is the same, but the letters are different. With the third category, which is what we're looking at today, then the makhraj is close to the makhraj of the other letter, though their makharij are not exactly the same. And this revolves in, as it relates to Hafs, as we mentioned, the qira'ah that we're acquainted with. In the riwayah of Hafs, then we have this form of idgham having being of two types. That we have idgham al-mutaqaribain, or idgham al-mutaqariban, that is wajib, and idgham al-mutaqariban, that is jaiz. That is, idgham al-mutaqariban, this idgham, the coming together of letters that are close in origin, that is compulsory, and the coming together of letters that are close in origin, that is permissible. And oftentimes when we hear this permissible, jaiz, this is permissible, you should know that the majority of the time when we hear this term permissible, this permissibility, the scholars of qira'ah, they hold that it is permissible on the basis of the fact that there was difference of opinion among the scholars concerning it. Since the qurra differed concerning whether or not it should be done this way or recited that way, then the scholars of qira'ah, they say that this is jaiz, it is permissible. Permissible because of the fact that the mountains of recitation, some said this, some said that, so they conclude therefore permissibility generally. With the first category that we're going to look at then, which is the wajib, or the category of those letters, or the coming together of two letters, yani idgham al-mutaqariban, that is wajib, we begin first and foremost with that which is connected to lam. We previously looked at the two categories that we're going to look at here today, and so we will reiterate them since it is something that you are already acquainted with. The first category is lam sakin with ra. Lam sakin, if it has ra beside it. If the lam itself, first and foremost, has sukoon, and that is, of course, what is intended by lam sakin. If it has sukoon upon it, then the following letter is a ra Then we have here al-idgham, and the ruling of this idgham is that it is wajib. The ruling of the idgham is that it is wajib. And so this occurs with the likes of the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, as occurs in Surah Isra, قُلْ رَبِّي قُلْ رَبِّي قُلْ رَبِّي, as occurs likewise in Surah Kahf, قُلْ رَبِّي أَعْلَمُ بِعِدَّتِهِمْ مَا يَعْلَمُهُمْ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ قُلْ رَبِّي. And so this statement is based or built upon two words coming together. The first of them ending in lam, and it is lam sakina. The second of them beginning with ra. And thus, when the first of them has a lam with sukun upon it, the second of them begins with ra, then the hukum here is that we have idgham al-mutaqaribain. Why idgham al-mutaqaribain? And why is it said that it is idgham al-mutaqaribain? Because if you look at the first letter lam, then of course we're familiar with the fact that lam, the makhraj of lam and the place of origin of lam, is at the root or close to the root of the incisor, the front upper incisors. Noon is closer to the root than lam is. Lam is behind noon slightly. Likewise ra. Ra is in a similar place, and this is one of the issues that has caused some difference among some of the scholars. That is, this category here, as far as hafs is concerned, it is wajib. Why? Because with hafs, lam and ra are from the same makhraj, or afwan, are from makharij that are close, very close, but the makhraj differs. While with some of the scholars of qira'ah like al-Farra, then he held that they are from the same makhraj. So with Farra, it enters into idgham al-mutajanisain. Idgham al-mutajanisain, letters that are from the same makhraj, but the characteristics are different. With Hafs, though, the qira'ah and the mode of recitation that we're familiar with, then the lam and the ra are very close makharij, but they are not exactly the same as was held by some. And so with some of the scholars of qira'ah, and this is a benefit, of course, if you go any further into looking into some of the affairs that we've discussed and in the science of Tajweed, then you'll be familiar with the fact that lam and ra, there is a difference of opinion concerning whether or not they have the same makhraj. Because some hold that the only difference between lam and ra is the tip of the tongue, or the upper part of the tip of the tongue, meeting the makhraj in the upper palate. So the upper part of the tip of the tongue meets the upper palate. Whereas with lam, it is more the tip of the tongue itself that meets the place of the makhraj on the upper palate. And so some hold that the position on the upper palate is exactly the same, but the only difference is with the lam, you use more the tip of your tongue, while with the ra, you use the tip and then some of the upper part of the tip. And of course, as we mentioned, there is some way or some means of the ra escaping, that one doesn't trap the letter with the rising of the tongue to meet the upper palate. But with, as we said, of course, our discussion here is around Hafs and Asim, which is the qira'ah that we're familiar with. With Hafs and Asim, then lam as-sakina meeting ra is a form of idgham that is wajib, that is idgham al-mutaqaribain. Idgham al-mutaqaribain in this instance. So with the likes of the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ وَإِنَّ الَّذِينَ اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ لَفِي شَكٍّ مِّنْهُ مَا لَهُمْ بِهِ مِنْ عِلْمٍ إِلَّا اتِّبَاعَ الظَّنِّ وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ يَقِينًا بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ. بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ. Here we have bal rafa'ahu Allahu ilay. Bal, you remember when we looked at lamat, then we said that the lam, the various manifestations of lam, and this is in particular lam sakina, lam with the sukoon upon it. We mentioned numerous manifestations, 5 in total. You remember, you should remember that we mentioned lam as when it occurs as an isim. Lam when it occurs as an isim. We mentioned lam, that is lam as a noun or within a noun. We mentioned lam al-amr, yani fal yaf'al. That is the lam of the command that is added to the fi'l al-mudari', added to the verb that is present tense. We mentioned the lam of the fi'l, that is the lam that is present within a fi'l or within a verb. We mentioned the lam of the harf, the lam of the harf, that is the lam that is present within one of the particles. And we said that those particles, when we're discussing them here, we're dealing with 2 particles, hal and bal. Hal, a particle used for in interrogation. Hal, it is a particle that is used to pose a question. And bal, which is a particle that is used for affirmation. And so here Allah Azza wa Jal mentions بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ. And so here بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ. We do not say بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ, rather بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ. If you were to write it in English, you would write it B-A-R-R. بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ, because the ra, it has shadda upon it. And so this is the first instance then. Lam as-sakina with ra. Lam as-sakina with ra. Similarly, as we're on the topic, it's an important one to mention. It is not every instance of lam as-sakina meeting ra that we have this assimilation and this idgham. There is a place within the book of Allah Azza wa Jal that lam as-sakina meets ra and there is no assimilation, there is no idgham or merging of the letters. And that is in Surah Al-Mutaffifin, the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ. And this is on the basis, ikhwan, of sama'. That is, on the basis of the fact that this was how it was recited, and this was how the ai conveyed it, from the Salaf, that when it came to بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ, there was no idgham, there's no assimilation. They would stop, and there would be this slight sector and this slight pause, and then they would make izhar of ra. Then they would make izhar of ra, that is, that they would manifest the ra, they would pronounce it and utter it clearly without merging the 2 letters. And so in this surah, we have this instance of the 2 not coming together. The general principle is that they do, but in Surah Al-Mutaffifin, كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ, there is a clear utterance of the lam of bal and a clear utterance and recitation of the ra of rana ala qulubihim. And so you should not then say, subhanallah, these people are making mistakes. If you ever listen to Surah Al-Mutaffifin, you should understand that here the principle does not apply. And this is something that is based upon sama', that it is taken from the ai of the past. That is how they conveyed it, generation from generation, upon كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. Now, that is as it relates to the first category then, lam as-sakin meeting ra. The second category again refers back and relates to lam, and that is lam of ta'rif. The lam of ta'rif, which is the lam that occurs with the alif and lam, that enters upon the beginning of some nouns in order to make them definite. And so this alif and lam is added to a noun to make it definite. If we were to say babun, then the meaning of that is a door. But if you wanted to make it definite, then you would add al. Al-bab. Al-bab now becomes the door. And so this alif and lam is added to a word in order to make it a definite particle. The construction, of course, has two letters. The first of them being alif and the second of them lam with sukoon upon it. We mentioned when we discussed the affair of lam as-sawakin, or the lamat as-sawakin, the lam that have sukoon upon them. We discussed the fact that lam of ta'rif, the lam that is present with this alif and lam, that it meets two types of letters. It either meets huruf qamariya or it meets huruf shamsiya. It either meets moon letters that we discussed them, we referred to them, as they are referred to, of course, by Ahlul Ilm, or it meets huruf shamsiya. Or it meets huruf shamsiya, that is to say, it meets letters that are referred to as sun letters or huruf shamsiya. And when we looked at the mas'ala previously, we categorized these letters into categories, and the categorization is based upon whether or not they are sun letters or moon letters. And we said that the sun letters have a particular characteristic, the moon letters have a particular characteristic. And of course, in our discussion here, what we're focusing upon right now is that which is connected to idgham, and that is the idgham of lam sakin from the alif and lam of ta'rif, just the lam with the letter that is beside it. And we said that the letters that meet it, there are two types. The huruf al-qamariyya, or the moon letters, and we discussed them in the session, and we'll probably mention them here. In this time we'll mention them in alphabetical order. In the last session, we mentioned them based upon some lines or two lines that are and have been constructed in order to remember what they are. I presume that most of you are familiar with them. We'll mention them then on this occasion in alphabetical order, based upon firstly the moon letters where they occur in the alphabet, and then we'll look at the sun letters and how they occur in the alphabet. The first of them is as far as the huruf al-qamariyya, the first of them is hamza, the second of them ba, the third of them jim, the fourth ha, then kha, then ayn, then ghayn yani, then fa, then qaf, then kaf, then mim, then waw, then ha, then ya. These letters are referred to as the huruf al-qamariyya. And as we mentioned, ikhwan, the alphabet is split down the middle. There are 28 letters, and 14 of them are qamariyya, 14 of them shamsiyya. As far as the huruf shamsiyya, then we have ta, tha, dal, dhal, ra, zay, sin, sheen, sad, dad, ta, dha, noon. All of them have examples, and we mentioned those examples or something of those examples in the previous lesson. What we're looking at here then are the huruf al-shamsiyya. The huruf al-shamsiyya, all of these letters, the huruf al-shamsiyya, as it relates to the lam of ta'rif, we have idgham with all of them. And so with, for example, ta, we have at-ta'ibin, at-ta'ibin, afwan, at-ta'ibin. At-ta'ibin here, if you were to listen to it, if we slowed it right down, at-ta'ibin, at-ta'ibin. This ta, the alif that is present here that has sukoon upon it meets this ta, and the alif itself, being the first of the two letters and having sukoon, is eliminated. And so we recite at-ta'ibin. At-ta'ibin. And And so we have here idgham. Ra, Ar-Rahim, Ar-Rahim. Sad, As-Samad. Nas, Noon, An-Nas. Dal, Ad-Dahr. Now if you look at each and every one of the letters that we've mentioned being sun letters, huruf shamsiyah, you will see that each and every one of them is close. The makhraj is in close proximity to the makhraj of lam. Lam, ikhwan, as we mentioned, be bringing the tip of the tongue up to the gum in the upper palate, close to the front central incisors. But look at all of them. Ba, Tha, Sad, Ra, Ta, Dal, Dad, Sin. All of them, ikhwan, in terms of makhraj, the makhraj is close to the makhraj of lam, though it isn't the same, but it is close. And so due to this close proximity, then we have the idgham and the assimilation of these two letters. Whereas if you were to look at the huruf qamariyah, then the huruf qamariyah, ghain, مثلا. Qaf, front of the mouth, ghain, the back of the mouth, nearly the throat. Ha, kaf, qaf, wow. These are letters that are not close to the makhraj. Therefore, the ruling in relation to the huruf qamariyah is al-idhar. Is al-idhar. That is, these letters are recited with idhar. They are made manifest. There is no assimilation. Yani, whether total, major, minor, no assimilation whatsoever. That is recited clearly, and this is recited clearly. And it is this rule, yani we're looking here at idhar now, it is this rule that Imam al-Jazari points to in the lines that we're going to look at. So he mentions idgham and idhar, and being clear about what should have idgham and what should have idhar. And of course, from the major mistakes that are made is giving that we should have idgham, idhar, and that we should have idhar, idgham. And that is something that if you recite to someone who is mutqin and someone who is strong in recitation of the Quran and proficient, then you will find that these are some of the areas that they may correct you upon. Yani you're making idhar or you're making idgham, and it should be idhar. As when we looked at tarqiq and tafkhim, again they may correct you on those affairs. Make more tarqiq on the ra, مثلا. Make more tafkhim on the harf al-isti'la, ayn. So dependent upon what it is he observes or she observes, as the case may be, then it is that the correction or those corrections will revolve around. And of course, the more one is corrected, the better one becomes, the more able one is to recognize his own mistakes. Because sometimes a person may recite and make a mistake in his qira'ah, and that mistake may not be from the lahn al-jali, it may not be from the major mistakes that affect the meaning, it may be from these smaller mistakes that one feels that could have been given more, more tahqiq could have been made, and the letter could have been recited more precisely, that he wasn't happy with the recitation, and so one may go back upon the recitation of an ayah in order to correct that word, that one, and one will find that he may fall into some old habits in terms of his recitation, so he goes back upon an ayah in order to correct the word and perfect his recitation of that word. That occurs. And so the knowledge then of all of these points, ikhwan, as we go along, and what we're going to be doing, bi'idhnillah, as we come closer to the end of these rules and come closer to the end of Jazariyah, hopefully by the end of Ramadan, that we're going to then take a page of the Quran and just together read the page of the Quran, read through it, and see what we can observe from the ahkam and from the rulings that we've discussed and that we've learned, where they should be implemented, what is the rule on this, what is the rule on that. That is something that we're going to do as we draw closer, inshallah. Alongside coupling that with looking at the Tajweed Quran, that is the Mus'haf that has the colourful letters within it, to look at the code that is being used within that, and then how to observe certain markings, what those markings represent from the rules that we have discussed, inshallah. Now, and so the second type of idgham al-mutaqaribain, then, that is muttafaqun alayh, that is, there is agreement upon, is the idgham of lam of ta'rif, the lam of alif and lam, the lam with that has sukun upon it, merging with the huruf al-shamsiyah, the letters or the sun letters that we have previously discussed. For those who want to memorize the lines that we mentioned, I mean, we'll mention them if anybody wants to write them down, and we'll try and mention them as slowly as possible. طب ثم صل رحما تفز ضف ذا نعم دع سوء ظن زر شريفا للكرم. Again, طب ثم صل رحما تفز ضف ذا نعم, that is the first line, دع سوء ظن زر شريفا للكرم. طب ثم سل رحما تفز ضف ذا نعم دع سوء ظن زر شريفا للكرم. The first letter of each of those words is a harf from the huruf al-shamsiyah. Now, moving on then, ikhwan, the third category or the third instance of idgham al-mutaqaribain is qaf as-sakin coming together with kaf. Qaf as-sakin coming together with kaf. And so the first two revolve around lam, while here we have the mention of qaf. Qaf as-sakin coming together with kaf is another example of idgham. The scholars, in relation to qaf coming together with kaf, they differ in relation to the mas'ala. Is it idghamun kamil or naqis? Yani, that is to say, is it, or do we have a complete assimilation of the letter such that the first letter disappears and the only thing that we have before us is the second letter? Or is the case that there is still something of the first letter present? Is there still something of the first letter present? From the scholars of qira'ah, as we've mentioned, ikhwan, it is an issue of difference. From the scholars of qira'ah, there are those who held that the idgham, or the type of idgham, is idghamun naqis, and that is the position of the likes of Makki ibn Abi Talib, Abu Bakr ibn Mihran, and others who held that it is idghamun naqis. And what did we say idghamun naqis was? We looked at it in yesterday's session. That is when we looked at ahattu, or لئن بسطت إلي يدك. That is, we have some of the characteristic of the first letter coming together with some of, or with the pronouncement of the second. And so Makki ibn Abi Talib and those who agree with him held that what we have here is a case of idghamun naqis. Yani, alam nakhluqkum, And so it is as though we're catching the sifat of qaf, but then we recite kaf. And so we can even hear the sifat, almost as though we're about to recite the letter. And if anyone were listening, then they would perceive that we're going to recite qaf, but it comes out as kaf. Alam nakhluqkum. Nakhluqkum. And this is idghamun naqis, where some of the sifat of the first letter meet the pronouncement of the second letter. But the majority of the qurra and the reciters, they hold that it is idghamun kamil. That here we have idghamun kamil. It is a complete idgham. And so one recites alam nakhluqkum. Nakhluqkum, yani from the lam, bypass the qaf completely straight to kaf. Alam nakhluqkum. Nakhluqkum. Yani there's no sound of qaf within it. We bypass the qaf straight to the kaf. And this then is idghamun kamil. And that is the case here. That is the third example. The fourth is noon or tanween meeting one of the letters that are present within the word combination, or the combination of letters yarmulun. Yarmulun. When we come to bab and noon, yani noon as-sakina and tanween, which is a chapter that is coming, noon as-sakina and tanween, there are specific rules related to noon with sukoon upon it or tanween. We're going to look at idgham in that place in further detail as it relates to noon. It is mentioned here because it is a category of idgham. But we're going to discuss it in its chapter, and that is under noon as-sakina and tanween. The only thing that you need to remember here is that noon as-sakina and tanween coming together with one of the letters of yarmulun, we have this merging and coming together of the letters. What is intended by the yarmulun? Yani ra, ya, ra, mim, lam, waw, noon. These letters, again, ya, ra, mim, lam, waw, noon. These letters, when they come together with noon as-sakina, when one of these letters meets that noon, then we have what is known as idgham. But then idgham we'll look at when we reach bab noon. As we mentioned, ikhwan, we're trying to introduce these affairs slowly and build upon them. When we reach bab noon, we'll look at idgham bi ghunna, idgham bi ghayri ghunna. But the main thing for you to look at here and concentrate upon is when noon as-sakina, that is noon with sukoon upon it, meets tanween, and then or tanween meets one of the 6 letters of yarmulun. Yarmulun, when it meets one of these 6 letters, we have idgham. Of course, ikhwan, you may be saying, but didn't we mention previously that we have a type of idgham when we have 2 letters coming together? Na'am, we did, and thus the noon here is to be taken. It's still considered idgham when noon and noon come together, but it is to be taken and is to be placed in the first category that we discussed, and that is idgham al-mutamathilan. Idgham al-mutamathilan, when 2 letters exactly the same come together. That is what we have here. Idgham al-mutamathilan with the noon is what we have when 2 letters that are exactly the same come together. In this case, noon and noon. So yarmulun, you should be acquainted with it because it's going to come up in ahkam al-noon, in the rulings related to noon. So be familiar with it. Yarmulun, yarmulun, yarmulun. Memorize it. And it's only 6 letters, ikhwan, easy to memorize. But remember, whenever we have noon sakina or tanween followed by one of the letters of yarmulun, we have idgham. As far as the type of idgham, then we'll look at that when we get to noon and the ahkam of noon sakina and tanween. And so, for example, we have فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ يعني مثلا خيرا يرى خيرا يرى خيرا يرى. Here خيرا we have tanween, خيرا خيرا. And so the issue here is not to look at the ra, but to look at the tanween. Look at the tanween, خيرا, even though it is upon the letter ra. But the tanween is what we're concentrating upon here. The tanween then meeting the following letter is yara. Therefore it is ya. If it is ya, then what is the ruling when tanween meets ya? Ya is from the letters of yarmulun. Therefore it is, and the ruling that is placed upon it is al-idgham. What type of idgham? Idgham al-mutaqariban. Idgham al-mutaqariban. Khayran yara. And so we do not say khayran yara. Khayran yara. La, khayran yara. Khayran yara. And so the noon, which is a noon sakin with this tanween here, this tanween which ends in noon theoretically, even though we don't see the noon, but we recite the noon khayran meets ra. Therefore the noon is eliminated and we say khayrayyara, khayrayyara. Similarly, for example, as occurs in Surah Ra'd, min waliyyin wala waq. Min waliyyin wala waq. Here, min waliyyin is the origin. Min waliyyin. Min waliyyin. Min waliyyin. Here we have a beautiful example, ikhwan, of both rules, of both affairs. Noon as-sakina with waw and tanween with waw. Noon as-sakina with waw and tanween with waw in one ayah. As we said, noon as-sakina and tanween, and there are two entities. Noon as-sakina, noon with sukun upon it, is one thing. Tanween is another. But in this ayah we have examples of both. Examples of idgham with both noon as-sakina and tanween. Yani, with the statement min waliyin, this in its origin is min waliyin. Min waliyin. So when we recite min waliyin wala waqa, min waliyin wala waq, we have min waliyin wala waq. First, the first min is noon as-sakina, followed by waw. Min waliyin. So we do not say min waliyin, rather we have idgham. Min waliyin. The second letter, the second or the end of that second word, waliyin, is tanween, followed by waw again. And so again we have idgham. And so here we have, with three small words coming together, we have noon as-sakina followed by waw, and we have tanween followed by waw. Min waliyyin wala waq. Min waliyyin wala waq. Similarly, min malin. Min malin. Mim followed by noon as-sakina followed by mim. And so we go straight from the first meme to the second meme, bypassing the noon completely. Mimmalin. Mimmalin. And of course, ikhwan, the examples are many. Therefore, we have the fourth example of idgham with the mutaqariban, and these are the examples that are muttafaqun alayha. These are the examples that are agreed upon. We then have some examples, ikhwan, that are jaiz based upon the fact that there is something of a difference, and they are three main places. The first of them, noon with meme. Noon with meme from the huruf that are present at the beginning, or the letters that are present at the beginning of the surah, of certain surah, in particular the ta, sin, meme at the beginning of Surah Al-Shu'ara and Surah Al-Qasas. Yani at the very beginning of the surah. Ta, sin, meme. With ta just has upon it what is known as mad tabi'i. Ta, then which follows is sin and meme. What does sin end with? Sin, if you were to write it as a word, sin written as a word is sin ya noon. Sin written as a word is sin ya noon. The noon at the end of sin, because when we recite those letters at the beginning of the surah, alif lam mim ra, alif lam ra, these are recited as using the names of those letters and not pronouncing the letters as a letter. So we do not say ta sa ma. Rather, we recite the names of the letters themselves. That is what was narrated by the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, conveyed by the companions, by the tabi'in, and so on. And so with ta, sin, mim, we recite ta, sin, mim. But here we have an issue. Do you say ta, sin, mim, making the noon clear, or do we recite ta, sin, mim? Here, bypassing the noon completely. Ta, sin, mim. This ta, and we're only doing this, ikhwan, in order to emphasize the letters. That is the only reason we recite it in that manner, to emphasize the letters, that you may hear them clearly. Ta, sin, mim, and not ta, sin, mim. Rather, ta, sin, mim. So again, if we were to write it in transliteration, it would write ta, sin, s, double e, c, double e, or we would have continuous e's, finished by or sealed with meme, with the m. So it's sin, meme, even though the letter is sin. But in recitation, because of this idgham, as occurs and is permissible with hafs, that in hafs, riwayat hafs, it is recited with idgham. Ta, sin, meme. That is the first instance, noon and meme, from the letters ta, sin, meme. Another instance of difference of opinion among the scholars is dal and dad. Dal and dad. يعني فقد ضل سواء مثلا فقد as occurs in Surah Baqarah and elsewhere فقد ضل سواء السبيل قد ضل سواء السبيل. Here قد ضل سواء السبيل, do we recite قد ضل سواء يعني where we do not hear the dal at all, because you remember from the ahkam of dal is that we have qalqala upon dal. If we have dal sakin, then the dal has qalqala upon it, which would necessitate qad dhalla, qad dhalla. Having to be, again, to be careful when we recite the qalqala, not to make the qalqala into a haraka. And some people overemphasize the qalqala and it becomes a haraka, it becomes a fatha. Qadi. This is overemphasis of qalqala. Qalqala is reverberation of the letter. فَقَدْ ضَلَّ. So do we recite فَقَدْ ضَلَّ سَوَاءَ السَّبِيلِ, or is it فَقَدْ ضَلَّ straight into dad? Again, the people of knowledge, they differ. Qira'at Hafs and Asim, our mode of recitation, or our popular mode of recitation, is that it is recited with idhar. That is, it is recited clearly. And so we make a difference between qad and dhalla. And so we recite فَقَدْ ضَلَّ سَوَاءَ السَّبِيلِ, فَقَدْ ضَلَّ سَوَاءَ السَّبِيلِ. قَدْ, the qalqala is pronounced upon the dal. فَقَدْ ضَلَّ سَوَاءَ السَّبِيلِ. And the third instance is ta and tha. Ta and tha, again, we have some difference of opinion among the scholars of recitation, and in particular in the statement of Allah in Surah Ash-Shu'ara, verse 141, كذبت ثمود, كذبت ثمود, كذبت ثمود. Do we recite كذبت ثمود, كذبت, again with emphasis, كذبت ثمود, or do we recite كذبت ثمود, كذبت ثمود? And so is it كذبت ثمود or كذبت ثمود? As far as riwayat Hafsin and Asim, the qira'ah of Hafs, then we recite كذبت ثمود with idhar. And so they are made clear in riwayat Hafs, but you may come across in some of the modes of recitation that it is recited with idgham. كذبت ثمود, كذبت ثمود. And that is, of course, because of the fact that there is relative close proximity. Ta and tha, they are relatively close. And so some of this difference revolves around whether or not those letters are close enough to be considered close. Yani, are they close enough to be given this rule of idgham al-mutaqaribain? That is, should it just be one makhraj away? Or can it be more than one makhraj away? There are different arguments that has led ikhwan to this differing that occurs among the scholars of qira'ah. What we will do then, ikhwan, to seal up in today's session, though we've gone on slightly longer than desired, is read then the lines of Bab al-Lamat from the Matan al-Jazariyah, and then we'll see and try and observe and extrapolate from these lines the lines that are relative to what we have previously discussed, whether today or over the past few days. And so you remember he mentioned under Bab al-Lamat وَفَخِّمِ اللَّامَ مِنْ اسْمِ اللَّهِ عَنْ فَتْحٍ أَوْ ضَمٍّ كَعَبْدُ اللَّهِ. Make tafkhim of the lam from the name of Allah if you recite it after a fat or a dhamma. And after fat or dhamma, then Allah Azza wa Jal, the name of Allah, Allah has tafkhim, as we mentioned previously. Now, he said, like Abdullahi. Then he mentions, وَحَرْفَ الْإِسْتِعْلَاءِ فَخِّمْ وَخْصُصًا. As far as the letters of isti'la, then fakhim. Then he mentions make tafkhim of them, and we said that the letters of isti'la, ikhwana, present within the word formation خص ضغط قض. Those are the letters of isti'la. خص ضغط قض. Those 7 letters. He mentions وحرف الاستعلاء فخم. Here فخم is فعل أمر that make تفخيم of the letters of isti'la. And then he mentions واخصص الإطباق أقوى نحو قال وعصى. He said, make apparent the letters of isti'la and in specific the letters of itbaq. We said yesterday that the letters of isti'la are categorized into the letters of itbaq. Yani the 7 letters are broken down into 2 categories. The letters of itbaq within them and the letters that do not have itbaq. And we said that the characteristic of itbaq, isti'la, is that the letter is recited in the upper part of the mouth and the upper palate within the mouth. Yani these letters are deep, dense letters. From those letters, there are 4 letters that have a specific extra characteristic, and that is itbaq. And itbaq is that the tongue meets the upper palate. And so we hear that in its sound. Ata, asa, ad. These letters and the letters of itbaq are sad, dad, ta, and dha. 4 letters. Here Imam al-Jazari, he mentions, and waqsus al-itbaq. Specify itbaq, yani pay special attention to itbaq because of its strength. Nahu qala wa asa. Like qala and asa. Qala, which is a letter that has yani qaf, it is from the letters of isti'la, but it is not from the letters of itbaq. But wa asa, sad, is from the letters of itbaq. And so qala is an example of one of the letters, qaf, being from the letters of isti'la that does not have itbaq. And so it should still have tafkhim or something from tafkhim within it, but not itbaq. While asa has the characteristic of itbaq. And so you remember when we said that one of the mistakes that individuals make with Surah Al-Fatiha is that they recite اهدنا الصراط المستقيم with qaf in mustaqim. Of course, the qaf is from the letters of isti'la. So when we say that they should recite ihdina, or that when they recite ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, in actuality they should recite sirat al-mustaqim, since the mim and the ta here are to be recited with tarqiq. That is not to forget that even though qaf has a kasra upon it, and so it is going to have a greater or a lighter sound than qaf ordinarily has when it has fatha and dhamma upon it, it is still from the letters of isti'la. But the point is to pay attention to that we should have tarqiq, that we should have tafkhim. He continues rahimahullah ta'ala, وَبَيِّنِ الْإِطْبَاقَ مِنْ أَحَطُّ مَعَ بَسَطَّ وَالْخُلْفُ بِنَخْلُقكُمْ وَقَعَ. He said, and make the itbaq clear with ahattu ma'a basatta. Make it clear with the 2 letters, the 2 words, ahattu and basatta, that we discussed yesterday. Itbaq is the sound that is a specific characteristic of ta. And so make it clear when you recite ahattu. You should be able to hear that itbaq. You should be able to hear something of the sound of ta, but you're not reciting ta. So he said, make it clear. Bayyinul itbaq. Min ahattu ma'a basatta. With ahattu and basatta. He said, wal khulf. Yani the khilaf and the difference of opinion occurs with nakhluqkum. We mentioned in the previous section. Nakhluqkum alam nakhluqkum. We said from the scholars are those who hold that there is idghamun naqis, in which case you would make the qaf apparent or something of the characteristic of the qaf apparent, and that the majority hold that what we have here is idghamun kamil, that the qaf disappears in the kaf and we do not hear the qaf at all, even its characteristics. He continues, وَاحْرِصْ عَلَى السُّكُونِ فِي جَعَلْنَا وَاحْرِصْ عَلَى السُّكُونِ فِي جَعَلْنَا. He said, we finished the line. وَاحْرِصْ عَلَى السُّكُونِ فِي جَعَلْنَا أَنْعَمْتَ وَالْمَغْضُوبِ مَعْ ضَلَلْنَا. He said, and be cautious and ardent upon the sukoon in ja'alna. Inna ja'alna. This is another area that regular means, because throughout Jazariyah, ikhwan, from the benefits of this text is that he constantly points out those regular mistakes that people make. So he said, be careful about ja'alna. This is another area that we have problems, and that is ja'alna. Oftentimes, because of the fact that we have lam and noon here, the lam preceding the noon. Here, the origin, ayyuhal ikhwa, is idhar. We have here idhar. We have idhar. That is, they should be recited clearly. Lam should be made clear, even though it has sukoon upon it. Noon should be made clear, even though it is right next to lam, and noon are close in makhraj. They are close in relation to where they occur. But when that which had come from the Prophet ﷺ conveyed to the companions, and they conveyed to the tabi'een, and so on, that ja'alna, the lam was made clear. He brings to our attention the fact that this affair, ikhwan, is sam'iyya, is something that is taken by way of riwayah. It is not something, ikhwan, that we just work with a general principle and work with that. Rather, this is specific. And so, ja'alna, ja'al is not from those instances of something close, coming to two letters close, coming together, where we have this assimilation or idgham. He said, be cautious and clear about pronouncing the lam in ja'alna. Because oftentimes we do hear ja'anna, waja'anna, waja'anna, waja'anna al-layla libasa. La, waja'anna al-layla libasa. وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلِ وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلِ. It should be made clear. وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلِ. He said, and أَنْعَمْتَ. Another instance. أَنْعَمْتَ. أَنْعَمْتَ. Because oftentimes we hear أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ. Whether أَنَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ or an'amta alayhim. But the point is, ikhwan, the noon here has sukoon upon it. The meme has sukoon upon it. An'amta. An'amta alayhim. An'amta alayhim. He mentions likewise, wal maghdubi. Wal maghdubi. And so here, the ghain has sukoon upon it. Maghdubi. Why? Because it's another area that is easy to make idgham when there shouldn't be idgham. Maghdubi alayhim. We hear muffled qira'ah of the word. Maghdubi. One of the problems that occurs here is that these two makhraj, they are two of the letters of isti'la. The makharij are not necessarily close, but because they're both letters of isti'la, then maghdubi, it is easy for the tongue to become twisted when it comes to reciting the likes of these words. So he mentions stressing that you should make clear أنعمت مغضوب alongside ضللنا which is another word that we have this merging of the letters. He said وخلص انفتاح محذورا عسى خوف اشتباهه بمحظورا عصى. He said, and be clear with the infitah. Infitah is the opposite of itbaq. Itbaq, as we mentioned, that the tongue meets the upper palate with the recitation of the letter ta, dha, sad, dad. Whereas infitah is the opposite, that the tongue shouldn't meet the palate and create this sound that is present when the tongue meets the upper palate. Rather, he said, remove khallis al-infitah. Make sure infitah is clear in mahdhuran and asa, since these are both words that are resemblant to two other words that should have itbaq. That is, make sure you make mahdhuran and asa different to mahdhuran and asa. Yani khawfa ishtibahihi. Yani out of fear that there's going to be a confusion. That is, that there's a confusion between mahdhuran and mahdhur. Mahdhuran. Here, mahdhur with dhal, mahdhur with dhad. With the dha, afwan. With dha. So here, mahdhur and mahdhur. And then he mentioned an asa, confusing it with asa. Asa meaning perhaps. Asa yani is either used to mean a cane or a stick, like the asa of Musa, or asa فعصى فرعون ربه, yani asa meaning he was disobedient. And so asa used for hope, confused with asa if we do not have this itbaq and the characteristic that differentiates sin from sad and differentiates dhal from dha. He continues, ikhwan, and we'll try and round up. وراعي شدة بكاف وبتا كشرككم وتتوفى فتنة. He mentions, and be careful about the shidda. And you remember, ikhwan, shidda, another one of the affairs related to the sifat of the huruf. We discussed the sifat of the huruf, ikhwan, in the beginning of the sessions. We looked at shidda, rikhwa, we looked at hams and jahar. Yani that we said that shidda is from the characteristics that are related to sound, while hams is from the characteristics related to the breath and the flowing of the breath. So he said, be careful about the shidda in kaf, since kaf is from the letters that have the shidda within the pronouncement of the letter. He's mentioning here and bringing your attention to the fact that you should be careful. Why? Because people regularly make mistakes, and as it relates to these sifat, people regularly make mistakes with shirk, and these are words, ikhwan, bearing in mind that they constantly come up in the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. Constantly one is reading the word shirk, shirkikum, shirk, and we have here kaf, just as we have ta. And so he highlights the importance of making a difference between the sifat, or in relation to these sifat. And so he mentions راعي شدة بكاف وبتا. So here mentioning this characteristic of shidda, which is present both in kaf and in ta, he mentions, be careful about this shiddah. Be careful about this shiddah. As I mentioned, Ikhwan, previously, this shiddah is a characteristic that returns back to the sound continuing. The sound continuing. Yani it is the restriction of the sound. While its opposite, rikhwa, is the movement of the sound. And so there are letters that have this shiddah. And we mentioned the letters of shiddah. Ajid qattin bakat. Ajidu qattin bakat. And so he said, in relation to kaf and ta, then ra is shiddah. Be careful of shiddah. Be careful of shiddah. So, if we look here at what exactly is intended by be careful with shiddah, bearing in mind, ikhwan, that we said in relation to shiddah and rikhwa, we have, number one, the letters of shiddah, ajidu qattin bakat, that is alif, jim, dal, qaf, ta, ba, kaf, ta. And then in relation to its opposite, which is rikhwa, we have the rest of the letters of the alphabet. The rest of the letters of the alphabet. And then between them, we have 5 letters that are not quite rikhwa and not quite shiddah. And that is al-bayniyya or tawassut. And they are 5 letters, lin umar. And so, lin umar, these are between the letters of shiddah, ajidu, qattin, bakat, and the rest of the alphabet. And so you will see, therefore, that in this affair, there is no mention of sheen. There is no mention of sheen. And so, shiddah, which is inhibas as-sawt, shiddah, which is that the voice is prevented or restricted, then is not from the characteristics of sheen. And so when he mentions يعني را'i shiddatan bikafin wata, when we recite kashirkikum, we understand sheen is not from its letters, but kaf is from the letters of shiddah. Ajidu qattin bakat. And so the beginning of shirkikum, we have the flowing and the movement of the sound and the voice, which is from the characteristics of sheen. Yani we have hams and we have rikhwa. Shirkikum. We have, after the ra, we have kaf. Shirkikum, which is something that should be restricted in terms of it. And so because of the fact that the word begins with the opposite, but in the middle of the word, we have this restriction and this shiddah, shirkikum, and tatawaffa. And so we should not hear, because we remember shiddah is the restriction of the movement of the continuation of the sound. So we should not hear tatawaffa, rather tatawaffa, that it is held and restricted in its place. Tatawaffa, and tatawaffa, and fitna. So we shouldn't have fitna, rather fitna. He mentions wa awwalay mithlin wa jinsin in sakan. He said, in the 2 first letters of mithil and jins, here he's talking about idgham al-mutamathilain and idgham al-mutajanisain. He said the first 2 letters of mithil and jins in sakan, if they are sakina and they have sukun upon them, adghim ka qul ربي أو بلى وأب. He mentions if they are of يعني مماثلة or مجانسة, then if they have sukun upon the first two letters, then we have idgham, like قل ربي and like بلى. And so he brings here two examples. قل رب is of course إدغام المتقاربين. إدغام المتقاربين. بلى here is المتماثلين. المتماثلين. As far as قل رب, as we mentioned previously, there is a difference of opinion as to whether or not lam and ra are from the same makhraj or not. Therefore, this falls under mutajanisain and mutaqaribain. If one considers it from the same makhraj, then it is idgham al-mutajanisain. If one considers it from a different makhraj, then it is idgham al-mutaqaribain. He said, وَأَبٍ عفوا وَأَبٍ في يوم مع قالوا وهم وقل نعم سبه لا تزغ قلوب فالتقم. And so all of these are just examples of al-ibana, that is when the recitation is made clear. في يوم قالوا وهم. These are all examples that we have mentioned previously. قل نعم سبه لا تزغ قلوب فالتقم. All of these are examples of idhar. That is when the word is recited clearly and there is no merging of these letters. So again, Ikhwan, we'll round up on that note. I do apologize, Ikhwan, for have gone on as long as I have. But we wanted